Good evening. I'd like to call to order the April 11th, 2023 meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. And now for our roll call. Mr. Smith.
Present.
Mr. Soda.
Here.
Ms. Hirsch.
Here.
Mr. Montano.
Here.
Mr. Dubois.
Here.
And I am Sarah Ferrante. I will be acting as chair tonight. Also present, Meg Green, our recording secretary, and Stephen Harris, our zoning enforcement officer. Excused tonight, Mr. Chizola and Mr. Wolf. So Ms. Hirsch and Mr. Smith, will you be voting members tonight?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Great. And Ms. Hirsch, will you act as our secretary this evening?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Wonderful. Okay, and on to our first order of business, 94 Edgewater Place. Mr. Montano will be recusing himself from this item. Mr. Dubois, will you vote in his place?
Yes.
Great. Okay.
'94 Edgewater Place, MBP 45/513/40 R-12.5, Max Case Esquire. Thank you. For Christopher McKenna, appellant, 24 Rose Street, to appeal the decision in accordance with the provisions of Section 9.2.1 regarding Certificate of Zoning Compliance issued to Tona LLC for the property located at 94 Edgewater Place, aka 0 Edgewater Place.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the board. I am Attorney Max Case. So I have given each of you a packet of materials. I am here tonight representing Christopher McKenna. He is the appellant, and he filed an appeal on February 10th, 2023 regarding a certificate of zoning compliance, regarding the failure of Tona LLC to post a sign at 94 Edgewater Place as required, and regarding the failure of Tona LLC or its attorney to file a legal opinion letter ascertaining that there are certain legal non-conforming lots under the provisions of Section 6.4.1 of the Milford zoning regulations. Now, before I offer any evidence on behalf of Mr. McKenna, I note that Mr. Montano is listed as a member of the board, and I've given you a tab 1. Mr. Montano does have a business relationship as the owner of 94 Tona LLC. I've produced information from the Secretary of State's office to substantiate the connection between Tona LLC and Mr. Montano. You'll see that Tona LLC has one member, which is Montano Cigarette, Candy, and Tobacco Incorporated. That is the only member of Tona LLC. And you'll see that the Secretary of State has also provided information on Montano Cigarette, Candy, and Tobacco Incorporated. And that report lists Gary Montano as the secretary of that corporation. So I would submit to you that there is a connection between Mr. Montano and the owner of 94 Edgewater Place. I understand now that Mr. Montano has recused himself from the proceedings, and I assume that he's left the hall and that he will not participate in any decision that you may make this evening. My client is entitled to assurance from members of this board who are going to vote this evening, that they have not discussed the construction that's taking place on 94 Edgewater Place with Mr. Montano, and that they have not discussed this appeal with him. If any of you have discussed any of these matters, going back to the time that that the coastal site plan application was filed in July of 2021, then you should recuse yourself now. So I will assume by your silence that that has not taken place.
Correct.
And that there has not been any discussion.
No discussion.
Amongst any of you with Mr. Montano. Okay, thank you so much. So this is an appeal under section 9.2.1 of the Milford zoning regulations. And for background purposes, that section recites that you have the authority to hear and decide an appeal where there is an alleged order or an alleged error in any order, requirement, or decision by the zoning enforcement officer, by Mr. Harris. And we submit to you that this appeal was filed, properly filed, on the form that's provided by the Planning and Zoning Office. Now, because this is an appeal, you have the authority to conduct a de novo hearing to determine if the requirements of section 6.4.1 were properly met. What do I mean by that? Well, that means that you should consider and you should evaluate the evidence that's being presented to you. This means that you must give it your own independent judgment and your own independent interpretation. And you should not rely simply on what Mr. Harris says or his interpretation. And the authority for that is a Milford case, Caserta versus Zoning Board of Appeals. Now, in making your evaluation and coming to your own judgment, you should keep in mind the guidance that the Milford zoning ordinances provide and their construction and the words employed. And they should be interpreted according to their usual and natural meanings. And the regulations should not be extended upon beyond their express terms. Common sense should be used by you in construing the regulations. And the case authority for that is Monroe versus Zoning Board of Appeals. Now, you should also keep in mind that Article 6, which governs non-conforming uses, structures, and lots, should be read as a cohesive whole. It should be read narrowly and should be complied consistently because the community has an interest in not extending the life of a nonconformity so that the nonconformities will gradually be eliminated. Now, Mr. McKenna is the owner of 24 Rose Street, and he's seated in the audience. Oh, there he is, okay. And you will hear from him later this evening. His property looks directly at 94 Edgewater Place. 94 Edgewater Place is directly across from Mr. McKenna's property at 24 Rose Street. Now, for background purposes, 94 Edgewater Place consists of 4 10 by 100 foot lots that were created in June of 1924. I wish it was 2024. And you'll see on tab 2, I've given you a copy of the map which shows the properties and shows the lots. And you'll see that lots 41, 42, 43, and 44 abut the harbor. You'll also see that Walker Manor was a division of property that was created in 1923, and it consisted of an equal number of house lots and an equal number of slips adjacent to the Milford Harbor. Edgewater Place, which is shown on the map, was a private road. Now, under tab 3 for the record, you'll find a copy of the warranty, the quitclaim deed to Tona LLC. And I call your attention to the legal description, Schedule A. It shows 3 separate parcels, and if you look at the descriptions, you'll see that there are references to lots 41, 42, 43, and 44. Now, there were no zoning requirements in 1923, and there were no zoning requirements until 1930. So lots 41, 42, 43, and 44 existed as lots. They were 10 feet wide, they were 100 feet long. Zoning regulations came into effect in 1930. I've given you as tab number 4 the zoning regulations that went into play in 1930. And you'll see that the minimum lot acreage that was required was 6,250 feet, and lots had to be 50 feet wide. So it's easy to see that lots 41, 42, 43, and 44, they lack the width and they lack the area. And so to that extent, they were deemed non-conforming lots. And because of the narrow nature of these lots, they really had no other use except as a slip for boats. You couldn't put a house on a 10-foot wide lot. Now, lots 41, 42, 43, and 44 were held by the original owners and their heirs until October 5th, 1951. And I've given you tab 5, which shows the first time lots 41, 42, and 43 were conveyed away, and they were conveyed to a Helen Smith in volume 351, page 206 of the Milford Land Records. And then if you look at tab 6, you'll see that lot, and I apologize for the poor quality of the copy, but you'll see that lot 44 was held by the original developers until July of 1966, when it was sold to Irene Brumel in volume 505, page 520. And subsequent to that time, lot 42 was divided in half. Half of it was given to an Arthur Hunt in volume 527, page 64 of the Milford Land Records, and the other half was given to a Howard Peck and Angelina Peck in volume 578, page 180 of the Milford Land Records. These 4 lots were subsequently assembled into one piece by way of 3 separate transactions from a George Wolfe trustee. And under tab 7, I've given you copies of the 3 deeds, the first one being a deed from Arthur Hunt to Mr. Wolfe, trustee, and that was for lot 41 and half of lot 42. The second one is a deed from Howard and Angelina Peck to Mr. Wolfe, trustee, and that was for lot 43 and half of lot 42. And the last one being a deed from Irene Brumel, again to Mr. Wolfe, and that would be for lot 44. So at that point, all 3 of the lots were now combined. Now, contrary to what was represented to the Planning and Zoning Board at its April 5th, 2022 hearing, these parcels were not vacant. And I've given you tab 8. And tab 8 shows you some of the things that were going on these parcels. So we've given you, from the building department records, a permit issued to John Brennan, who was a prior owner, by an electrical contractor, presumptively to supply electricity to the property. We've given you a copy of a permit issued by the Milford Inland Wetlands Agency for a driveway restoration project. And we've given you a copy of map AB 2926, which shows on it, if you take a look at it, a metal canopy, a brick patio, a brick wall, a stockade fence, an existing dock, and pilings. So clearly, these properties were not vacant. And frankly, folks, if that's not enough for you, by its own admission, Tona Inc., in its application for a coastal site plan review in tab 9, and I've given you the first page and I've given you page 4, TOMA reports that this site currently contains a patio, ramps, aluminum canopy, bulkhead, and gravel parking area. So in their own words, they're admitting that these parcels were not vacant. Now, this is relevant for a couple reasons. First of all, there is a process here in Milford under our zoning regulations, under Article 6.4.1, as to how we're going to deal with non-conforming lots. These lots are in an R12-5 zone. So we all know that in an R12-5 zone, you have to have 12,500 square feet, you have to have a lot width of 80 feet, and a lot depth of 100 feet. Well, we know that even combined, these lots do not have 12,500 square feet. They only have 4,000 square feet. And we know that even combined, these lots do not have 80 feet. They only have 40 feet. There is a provision, however, 6.4.1 does provide that a property owner can get a certification, but there are a number of hoops that you have to jump through. So 6.4.1 lays out the requirements that a property owner needs to meet in order to get his lot certified. So one of the requirements is that the present owner or his predecessors did not illegally create this non-conforming lot, and the lot was of legal size when it was created as a lot. Well, we know it wasn't a legal lot when it was created. It was only 10 feet wide. And when the zoning regulations came into play, it was immediately a non-conforming lot. The second requirement is that the present owner or predecessors in title did not or does not own any land adjacent. Well, I just told you that how those lots were assembled and how they were divided up. So it's our contention that they can't meet the second requirement. There's a third requirement, and it says yard setback coverage and other zone requirements can be met, and further provided the owner or his agent presents satisfactory evidence of compliance. Well, we don't know about that, and I'll tell you why in a moment. Now, the fourth one's not applicable. The fourth one is that the lot was never sold by the city of Milford. Well, we know that that's the case. The regulations go on to say that if you meet all the requirements of 1 to 4, then your next step is to go to the Planning and Zoning Office, and your next step is to get a poster and to post the property. And it's a big poster. It's supposed to be 24 by 36. You're supposed to post it on the property. And then, after you post it on the property, then you're supposed to come back to the Planning and Zoning Office, and you're supposed to file an affidavit that you did all these things. Now, I submit to you that none of these things were done. And to substantiate that, I've given you under tab 10 all of the documents that were in the Planning and Zoning Office as of the date that my client filed the appeal. And Mr. McKenna was the one who inventoried the file. He asked repeatedly if those were all of the documents, and you will see that there's nothing in here about a certification under 6.4.1. You'll see that there's nothing in here about an affidavit with respect to posting. You won't see anything about any compliance with 6.4.1. Now, there's one other out for a property owner. So there's 6.4.3. Now, 6.4.3 says that if the properties are vacant, then they can be combined to reduce the nonconformity, and you can get your certificate of zoning compliance. So what's the key here? Well, the key here is vacant. And I've given you a list of things, that show that it's not vacant. Mr. McKenna has pictures that will give you a better idea as to how the property was not vacant. I've told you in very precise terms the admission that was made by Tona Inc. with regard to what was going on the property. Now, the term vacant, it's not a term that's defined in the Milford zoning regulations. And I said to you at the outset, the words should be given their usual and natural meanings. So what do we do when we don't have a definition? In our zoning regulations, we have Section 11, which gives you a whole laundry list of definitions. So the next thing we do is we resort to dictionary, Merriam-Webster. Merriam-Webster says online, that vacant means not put to use. Well, I submit to you very clearly that these lots were being put to use. You have the canopy, you have the patio, you have the fence, you have the bulkhead, you have the docks. It's clear that they were being used. So we submit to you that on the evidence that's submitted, that this proves that these lots were not vacant. So finally, there's a provision in Article 6 about what do we do when we have a non-conforming lot so that we can go ahead and do something on it, build on it. And under 6.1.4, there's a requirement of a certificate of zoning compliance. And the requirements this is pretty straightforward. No non-conforming use, structure, or lot shall be constructed, reconstructed, enlarged, extended, altered, moved, changed, maintained, restored, or replaced unless a certificate of zoning compliance has been issued by the zoning enforcement officer, stating that such use, structure, lot is an existing legal non-conforming use, structure, or lot under the regulations. Can't do it. So we have no evidence anywhere that we have a certificate of zoning compliance. So that's what this case is all about. There is no certificate of zoning compliance, okay? There should be a certificate of zoning compliance because the certificate of zoning compliance is the condition precedent for all the other things that take place on this lot. The building permit, other permits that were taken, foundation permits, other permits that were taken out by the property owner. It's not there. And so we're asking this board tonight to uphold this appeal we're asking you and you will hear from the people the impact of what this house has been on their neighborhood. I want to also note for the record that the applicant did not sit idly by while construction took place. You will see that the applicant, through my office, filed a request with the department to enjoin construction of this house. And that request was summarily denied. It was denied in a 2-page letter citing no reasons. So last but not least, I want to ask that as part of the record, that you include the entire file of the Planning and Zoning Office, the zoning regulations that are Milford zoning regulations, so that they will be part of the record in the event an appeal is necessary. So if anyone has a question, I'll be happy to answer it, or I will be here.
Any questions?
Attorney Case, your exhibit number 10
Yes.
is a list of purported documents from Planning and Zoning Office with notes.
Yes.
Who created this document?
This document was created by, my office created this document with information from Mr. McKenna. All the words in that document came from Mr. McKenna. There was no editing.
Okay, so Mr. McKenna went down and looked at these, reported back to you, and then you generated this.
He gave me a list, yes, and he went more than once.
I don't think he can speak off the record.
Yes, okay, so I'll just repeat what he said.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have to follow the recording.
I know. Mr. McKenna went to the office, and when he looked through the file, he requested copies of each and every document that is listed in tab 10,
Okay.
so that his file would be complete, so that we could make an accurate, true and correct representation to you. And just for the record, I've given a copy of what you have to Mr. Harris, and I've given a copy of what you have to Attorney Crusaden. I received a packet of documents from Attorney Crusaden at 6:20 this evening, and I thank him for the courtesy, even though it was late, of sending these to me.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Harris?
Good evening, board members. Stephen Harris, Milford Zoning Enforcement Officer. I'm going to start off by reading...
Madam Chairman, could I just say for the moment, I think it's the usual course for the board to take those people who want to speak in favor before they listen to those who are in opposition. And there are people who are here that would like to speak on this.
Yeah, because this is appeal of our zoning enforcement officer, he gets the right to speak, and then we hear from the public.
Okay, that's different than what it's been in the past, Madam Chairman. This is not my
No,
first
because this
appeal.
is not a variance request, this is
No,
an appeal, so there are
I
two
understand.
parties involved.
understand.
Well, we're going to hear from Mr.
right.
Harris, and then
May-
we'll hear from the
okay.
public.
May I make one other comment, Madam Chairman?
Sure.
Because I failed to do one important thing. My address, my office address is 185 Plains Road, Milford.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, board members. Stephen Harris, Zoning Enforcement Officer. First, I'm going to read some comments into the record and then walk you through a list of exhibits that I have. So, first of all, this appeal is improperly before the board. The board has no jurisdiction to hear it for two reasons. Number one, the appellant seeks to use the Zoning Board of Appeals to overturn site plan approval of the Planning and Zoning Board. The ZBA has no authority to overturn an approval by the Planning and Zoning Board. Appeals of Planning and Zoning Board actions must be taken to Superior Court. Second reason, Section 9.2.1 of the appeal application reads, quote, certificate of zoning compliance issued to Tona LLC for property located at 94 Edgewater Place, also known as 0 Edgewater Place, close quote. This claim is factually inaccurate. A certificate of zoning compliance has not been issued. The board should deny this appeal for those two reasons alone. However, even if the board had jurisdiction, the appeal fails for the following additional reasons. Number one, again, quoting from the application. Open this up. Yes, of course, it's not going to work. All right, let me just read. Oh, here we go.
Stephen, are we going to get the presentation on the screen behind you as well? We need it on this screen here. Oh, I turned it
No,
on.
it's turned on from there. It was working before. Yeah, okay, good. Okay, let me zoom in a bit. So this is the application. So, failure of the applicant to post a sign notice on property in accordance with the zoning regulations. This appeal does not say what sign was supposed to be posted or noticed and under what section of the regulations this was supposed to have been accomplished. Failure of the applicant's attorney. If we move down to the bottom of the page, these are the supporting reasons, the reasons that support the actual appeal itself. So the actual appeal was a certificate of zoning compliance was issued. And the supporting information they're offering is this. One, failure of the applicant to post a sign on the property in accordance with zoning regulations. This appeal does not say what sign was supposed to be posted and under what section of the regulations this was supposed to have been accomplished. Number two, failure of the applicant's attorney to submit a legal opinion letter ascertaining that the lots are legal non-conforming lots under the provisions of Section 6.4.1. Section 6.4.1 does not apply. Section 6.4.1 heading reads, quote, use of non-conforming lots where applicant or predecessors never owned any adjacent land, close quote. The original developer lots are in common ownership and all abut each other. Therefore, 641 is not germane. Number three, the lots in question are not pre-existing non-conforming lots. That's a quote. Map R12 on file in the city clerk's office dated June 10, 1924 shows developer lots 41 through 44, and the appellant has also offered that these lots were created in 1924. Four, the neighborhood concerns regarding the use of an environmentally sensitive area, safety, and the construction in keeping with the neighborhood were never voiced. Site plan approvals are an administrative function. They do not require a public hearing. Site plan approval was granted on April 5th of 2022. So in summary, the appeal is improperly before the board for two reasons. One, it seeks to overturn the site plan approval, and the ZBA has no such authority. Two, the appeal claims a certificate of zoning compliance was issued, and that is factually false. I'm going to walk you through a list of exhibits. Okay, so first, oops, not that. This is the approval letter from the Planning and Zoning Board. It's addressed to Attorney Kerseiden, who was the counsel for the landowner. And it says, at the meeting held on April 5th, the Planning and Zoning Board voted to approve with conditions your coastal site plan. So this has already been decided. Signed by the city planner. This is the zoning permit to build the house. So after site plan approval, it is a ministerial function for me to issue a zoning permit. I have no choice. So the board acts, I issue the zoning permit, and this is the zoning permit to build the house. And this is the title page. It's all signed and stamped. This right here is the boundary map showing you the lots. The red line goes around the property. This right here is a lot consolidation map, as you can see in the title block down here. So these lots are to be combined into one new parcel of land, which is pretty common. And again, the site plan showing the footprint of the house, drainage, and so forth. I won't bore you with the details. There's rendering of the house. So this right here is a photograph of Walker Manor in Milford. This is on file in the city clerk's office. As you can see, it's June 10th, 1924. This is the overall map, which is also up there on that easel. And the highlighted areas show lots 41, 2, 3, and 4. Those are the lots in question that the house is being built on. So these lots were created prior to subdivision regulations. They were created prior to the adoption of zoning regulations. And the appellant has also agreed to that as well. So I just want to circle back again to the most important thing as to why we're here. We're not here to decide if these are lots of record or if the owner can build on them. Those questions have already been answered. There was a site plan application that was approved, a zoning permit was issued. This board cannot revisit an action by the Planning and Zoning Board. It's that simple. So just to circle back to the two primary reasons that you should deny this appeal is, number one, you can't overturn an action by the Planning and Zoning Board. And number two, the appeal itself is factually defective because it says that I issued a certificate of zoning compliance that is simply not true. So any argument that follows from that statement is likewise irrelevant. So I would respectfully ask this board to deny this appeal. Thank you.
Question?
Stephen, doesn't a certificate of zoning compliance normally come when the structure is finished? Not before they
Yes.
start building?
Yes, when this house gets finished, the building department will issue a certificate of building compliance. I'll issue a certificate of zoning compliance, and then a certificate of occupancy will be issued.
So let me ask you this. Did this all come about because Planning and Zoning Board got rid of the lot merger? Is that how these lots got created? Or is
The
that how
lot-
they were able to do it?
Well, the lots, yeah, under common ownership, you can combine the lots.
But before Planning and Zoning got rid of the merger rule, where they were adjacent and somebody had...
Yes, section 642 was the merger rule.
So if they never got rid of that, they couldn't have built on this, correct?
Well, we didn't look at it under the merger rule because the merger rule did not exist. The regulation was repealed.
Right, but if it wasn't repealed, could they have built on it? Say the merger rule was still in effect.
Yes, they could have consolidated the lots.
And they
yes.
still could have built?
Yes.
Okay.
But that's really neither here nor there.
Right.
Because this entire issue has already been decided by the Planning and Zoning Board.
Right.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Is there anyone speaking in favor of this application?
Good evening. Thank you very much for taking the time to hear our appeal. My name is Chris McKenna. I live over at 24 Rose Street in Milford, Connecticut. And I just want to give you a little background of the area. So the paper road known as Edgewater Place was an accepted street in Milford in 1993. That street runs between the owners of the boat slips along the harbor in the backyards of the people that live on Rose Street. The slips were originally 10 foot wide and approximately 100 feet deep, and they ran from the Edgewater Place Road to the harbor. At this point, I handed you guys a package. It's the engineering letters from the city engineer, and I just wanted to review these letters. The first letter is dated September 15th, and the city engineer went out to the property. He received certain documents, and he went through and he reviewed the documents, and he reviewed the project. In this September 15th letter, he had some concerns, and he listed out, he had about 9 issues with the application. He had some issues with the location of the soil erosion and sediment controls. He had some issues with the coastal resources, and they were not being indicated on the plan. He had issues regarding the stormwater treatment. There were some missing calculations regarding the net zero runoff. The Army Corps of Engineers addressed the activities on the floating ramp and docks, but did not mention or didn't do anything on the upland portion of the property. And he had many concerns with the coastal area management application. So these were issues that he had with the application. There's many water issues on this project. The building covers about 30 to 40% of the building lot, and there's some issues on where the water is going to run off. Is it going to run off on the road and onto the other people's properties? There's not a sufficient drainage down there to get rid of the water during high times or regular storms. The city engineer also made many recommendations and comments in his letter. And in that letter is the second letter, or that's the first letter. He then went ahead on April 1st, he issued a second letter. And in this letter, he rescinded all of his recommendations. And I'm not 100% sure if those recommendations were taken care of or not, but he rescinded all the recommendations. And in his letter dated April 1st, he cited, also included in your package, a stipulation agreement and then a judgment in 1993. And the stipulation agreement was dated February 17th, 1993, and the final judgment was dated September 13th, 1993. And so what was going on back then, from what I've read and have been told, there was a dispute regarding access to the boat slips. And a couple of the homeowners on Rose Street extended their property down onto the road, and when people wanted to get to their properties, the boat slips, they couldn't access the boat slips. They went back and forth for a while, and I guess they finally ended up in court, and these two documents were the result of that dispute. And so at the end of the day, it really was a court case regarding a dispute of access to the slips and making sure that utilities could be put down on the properties. And so that was pretty much it. So I am not sure that the city engineer's letter actually is covered by these two documents. These documents were a dispute about, getting access to boat slips and not necessarily who's going to do the work down on the city road. So I'd also like to hand out, there's another document here. So in this document, it's dated April 13th, 2022. It's a revised letter. It's a revision to a letter dated April 8th, and it is actually the approval by the Planning and Zoning Board of this project. And in this, it talks about the city engineer's letter. And so they made this letter a condition of the project. And basically, the condition is that the city's not going to acknowledge any work to be done or maintain the city road, and then they're not going to require the applicant will not be required to do any improvements to the road. So I guess as a neighbor, as one of the homeowners and as the neighbors, we're just concerned of who's going to be responsible for this road. If the city's not claiming responsibility and Tona LLC is not claiming responsibility, who's going to be responsible for the water runoff? Who's going to be responsible for the drainage? There's high tides and water. It floods all over the place over there. So those are just some concerns. We're just not sure who's going to take responsibility, and is the city taking on a lot of liability in case of accidents down there if they're not going to maintain this road? So those are just some questions that we had. I also would like to go over some pictures that we have. These pictures that I've left up there, this first picture is a picture of from the docks looking up at the back houses of 24 Rose Street. And this little section here was the area that was causing the problems regarding access to the boat slips. The people were not able to get in and turn around and get their cars in there. So that's what the dispute was all about. This is what the property looked like after. They basically, the judge told them that they had to clear it out and make way, and they did, and they made access. But it really was just for access to these boat slips. There never was any consideration for a house being down there. And if you look close in this picture, you could actually see the subject property, and it has on it the cabana, it has the patio, it has the fireplace, it has the wall and the gate. Some additional pictures I have regarding the water. This is just a normal Saturday afternoon over at Edgewater Place. This was just a rainstorm that we had on March 4th this year, 2023. This is just water that is not able to go. If you look close, right down here is where the property would be. You might even be able to see the house. Again, here's another picture of just all the water that sits down there on Edgewater Place and into the backyards of the homeowners on Rose Street. This is at the end of Harborview, and this is Harborview and Edgewater. Again, this is covering halfway up the corner between Edgewater and Rose Street. This has water all around at the end of Wilbar and Edgewater, including water sitting in the back of the yards there. And again, this is just a normal rainstorm. I'm not quite sure this stuff was considered when we went ahead and this. Here's a picture of the house being constructed. Again, water all in the backyards, all the way through the whole property. So I'm not quite sure where they're getting. There's capable of getting the water out of there. Here's another picture again with the home in the back that's being built. Again, all the backyards covered with water, the whole road covered. And lastly, another picture here of the backyards filled with water, along with the house over here in the corner and the whole street filled with water. So this is just one Saturday. We also had a storm in December, like December 23rd, similar water, but obviously we didn't take pictures because the house hadn't even been started yet. We weren't aware of a house being built there. So on the 23rd, there was a big storm. Again, we don't have pictures for that storm because we were unsure. We didn't know that there was a house even being underway to be constructed. In addition, we had over the last few years, 10 years or so, we had Superstorm Sandy, which, I live at 24 Rose Street. The water came up into my garage, which has got to be, a couple hundred feet from the harbor, so it was up pretty high. And then also Irene, very similar, came up to the driveway. So, in addition, just to follow up with what Max had said about the property and it being used, we also include in there an assessor's map, which actually shows the property, shows that there's a boat slip there. They have a ramp up onto the property along with the cabana and the fireplace and all that stuff there. Here's another shot, an aerial shot of a similar, showing up the cabana and the boat slips. For years, the boat slips were rented to two different fellas. One was the Challenger, and then there was another fellow who rented, his boat was the Splenda. So those are another pictures. So these pictures were like pre-2019. Here's another picture, the boats and the cabana. So obviously the place is in use. This is just a little close-up picture of that. We have another picture, a little bit closer, of the actual cabana with all the stuff inside the cabana, the brick fireplace and all that. We also have, I mentioned the road and the water and the runoff. So what they're doing down there is they're filling up the road with gravel. So what's happening, their property is not going to be retaining the water. The water's hitting his property and then running around off into the backyards of the rest of the neighbors on the street. There's just no drainage for the water to get out of the neighborhood. So, and nobody now is we're going to put a house there, and we possibly have 3 or 4 more people who have at least 4 lots who may qualify for housing down there. So this could end up with having, maybe 4 or 5 houses down there, very short order. So here's another picture we have. This is one that was in the planning book. The property ends here, but it shows the whole property cleared now. And this is the property in question at 94 Edgewater. I guess one question I have is I know that there's a regulation where if you remove 50% of a structure, that you have to now comply with the current zoning regulation. So this clearly shows that there were structures on there and now they're gone. And so I wonder how that would stand within the regulations. Any questions?
Ms. Hirsch?
Thank you. Mr. McKenna?
Yep.
A few of the photographs that you submitted, the ones that look like, for example, an iPhone shot them.
Yes.
You shot those yourself?
I did not, no.
Okay. What year are these from?
Those are pre-2019. Gary had purchased the property, or Tona LLC purchased the property in 2020. That's my friend's boat on there, and
Your friend's boat in his slip?
Yeah, it was rented before. He rented in that slip for. He rented that slip from 2007 to 2019.
Okay.
And then when Gary was purchasing the property, he moved. And those were pictures that were obtained just for people in the neighborhood.
So the slips were always there and people rented them prior to Tona LLC purchasing
Correct.
the
Yep.
property, and now no one else can rent that slip?
Exactly.
Okay.
He's taking it over. He's attempting to build
Sure.
his house. Yeah.
And so which of the cabanas, because there's pictures here with different cabanas, I just want to make sure I'm on the right property as I'm looking down.
Sure. Let me
Is
just-
it this one, for example, on this photo, is that the cabana that you and council referred to? That's the neighbor. This is the cabana. Is it a structure, or was it like something that someone comes, places down, and removes? It doesn't come down. Sorry, the microphone has to pick up what you're saying. Thank you for coming
Sorry about
forward,
that.
though.
Yeah. So in that picture, what was on there? There was like a metal roof. There's 4 lean-tos, posts that are in the ground. There's a patio. There's a brick wall with the fireplace, and people would access the boats and use that for cooking and having parties and events.
I see. But you're saying that those were permanent structures, they weren't
Permanent
something I
structures.
could buy at Costco, for example,
No.
and place on there and remove
They were
at my
there all
leisure?
winter. They were there, they never
Okay.
removed. There's pictures of that first picture I showed you from in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
That picture still was there. It was, the brick was there, yeah, and it wasn't removed.
Okay, and then this photo here that shows, just a vacant lot, essentially, what was the year this was taken?
This picture was it's in the book, it's in the application for the permit.
Okay.
I don't know what year it was taken, but it's in with the record.
You're not sure what year that's from?
No.
Okay, so
It
it
has
could have
to
been
be-
after purchase, for example?
After purchase, yes, he went and cleaned everything off the lot,
Okay.
scraped it, and then yes.
Was there ever a dwelling on that
No.
area? No dwelling? Okay. And then you talked a lot about water collecting near the road and other areas, so you're attributing the building of this dwelling to that runoff?
No.
No.
Currently, there's a lot of water that always comes into this neighborhood.
Sure.
Nobody's addressing the water. The city's not willing to address the water, and we're not going to make the homeowner address the water. This guy's building a house. But he is going to end up causing more water because he's built up his property with stone, and he's going to have a roof cover, and he's going to cover 40% of the lot. So eventually, just in normal rainstorms, he's going to be pushing water off into other properties possibly, and then that's going to run into the backyards of the people on Rose Street.
Okay,
I'm not saying tonight that the
okay,
pictures that I showed you is the reason, but that would be what's coming.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. McKenna. Is there anyone else speaking in favor of this application?
My name is Regina Sirico. I've been in the
Ma'am, we
Walker
need your
Manor-
address for the record, too, and if you could please speak more directly into the microphone.
61 Wilbar Avenue. I've been in the neighborhood on Wilbar Avenue for 40 years. Okay, I have some documents I'll...
Ma'am, before you get started, I will say thank you for this information. We've heard a lot of information already from Attorney Case and Mr. McKenna. We will register everybody's comments, but please try to keep your comments to new information.
Yes, and I'm hoping that with pictures, it'll help explain what we've been saying. So first of all, the cover page shows the 12.5 zoning that includes Edgewater Place. The next page, again, is the slips and the Walker Manor map. Page 3 shows a sample title of a lot slip, which states that it's water rights, wharf rights, riprap rights, and privileges connected and appurtenant to the above premises, okay? So it's showing water use. On the left-hand side of that page, it says some of these lots, even though they were on paper in 1930, they may or may not have been sold with the home, and they may have been split from a home at a later time or held by the developer and sold later. We as property owners in this area tried to follow every procedure correctly to process and submit an appeal in a timely manner. And that appeal was February 10th, within 15 days of our notice, which was technically the date the first piling went in the ground on the property, because we didn't have notice at any other time. In previous years, over the 40 years, the only thing that was ever allowed on those lots were open structures. Sheds or enclosed structures were never allowed, and any type of building was not allowed. Some of the questions that we had also is that the lot size differs from titles, surveys, and plot plans, and it depends on whether or not you're extending the property line into the water. And so there's other questions of, on this property, whether the setback to the harbor is actually enough of solid ground and not just counting to the high tide watermark. We have a question also on the building that the pilings were not shown on the plans. The plans showed concrete foundation and concrete pilings, and what was installed on the property was wood pilings. And so there's a question of whether those wood pilings are deep enough, big enough in that soil to support a structure. So we were looking for any structural engineering reviews on the piling installation and their placement and their depth. We're also concerned that those pilings are in the 10-foot setback. We certainly don't think this is in keeping with the neighborhood. It's the first home that's on pilings directly on the harbor. It's our understanding that this may be one of 4 that can be put on the harbor. And what's to say there wouldn't be more on the opposite side of the harbor in the wetlands there? I think it's a dangerous precedent. We have a natural resource that's beautiful, and we're allowing piling houses on a harbor, and it's not just the neighborhood. Everyone enjoys the harbor. It's a beautiful venue. Posted in the Planning and Zoning office is a sign that says all new construction requires concrete curbs, sidewalks, and apron, and it's not applied to this property. Apparently, Planning and Zoning has waived this requirement, which gives us concern as who's responsible. If you look at page 11, on the left-hand side picture, you see the green space. And what the green space did was absorb the water. And as soon as you put hardscape, the water runoff has nowhere to be absorbed. Page 12 shows 2 storms, and these are not hurricanes, and these are not major storms. These are just high tide and rain. The first one on the left, and that's a video that if Chris leaves you with a thumb drive of all the documents, this video, which scans across the property, shows the water and the water height. That grassy area is the middle of the road, so the water is extending over the road into the properties. And on the right, you can see partial construction of 94 Edgewater. And when that water hit on March 4th, it was 3 to 4 feet deep under that structure. The porta potty was listing over, the plywood was floating to the docks, and the construction crew on Harbor Avenue could not traverse Edgewater Place at all. And that water stays there until the tide recedes, so it's a 4 to 5 hour flood. And our concern also is in any emergencies, now that you're putting houses there, you cannot get to the people that may be in those houses. The people in that houses can't come down their stairs and get in their cars, and it's a 4 to 5 hour flood. The drainage is not appropriate. The storm drains fill with high tide, and so the water has nowhere to go. We had expected a stop work order when we filed the appeal, which did not happen. We expected a stop work order when the attorney sent a letter. It took 2 weeks to get a reply. In the meantime, TONA continued to build for 3 weeks without a building permit. He had only had a permit to do a foundation at that point. Again, I just on page 14 showed additional pictures. The permit was for the foundation only. You can see a picture of the pilings and then the construction of the home. So what we're saying is we took all legal processes to stop construction. It seems like an end-run process that we're just being rolled over. We're 78 homes being compromised for one taxpayer, and we're 78. We don't feel the lot complies at all. Who's the tenant going to sue when they can't get out of their house? And who are the property owners going to sue when the flooding comes up to their driveway and into their garage? We don't feel it's permitted use. The conjoined lots had prior use. The lot's too small. It's in a flood zone. It's an AE flood zone, 2 blocks from the V flood zone on Dock Road. So we're even concerned with the structure with windage, if there is a hurricane, that it could torque, that it could twist, that it could fall. We're concerned with what gets stored underneath the structure, propane tanks, lawn furniture, boating supplies, because to this point, nothing gets stored on those open lots. The pilings that were installed were wood and not concrete. The roof on the structure extends into the 10-foot setbacks, so the roof is going to cascade water to the sides of the property, onto the adjacent property. The gravel grading was done so that this property sits a foot or so taller than the adjacent property, so the water runoff is to the adjacent properties and into the backyards. The pilings, the roof awnings, the stairs all encroach into the 10-foot setbacks. The appeal process should have put a stay on the project. The city's attorney's concerns were never really addressed or resolved. We're concerned that there's no curiosity by the Planning and Zoning Board when approving the coastal management plan, and where the planning and zoning permitting procedures really followed. We have these concerns. I thank you for your time and for listening, and we have just one other speaker, so thank you for your time.
Just one moment.
Yes.
Ms. Hirsch, you had a question?
Thank you. Just a couple of comments you mentioned regarding your packet, page
Okay.
11.
Okay.
You talked about, again, flooding, which is a theme I've heard now from both you and Mr. McKenna. And page 11 shows flooding that goes over into the grassy area, right?
Yes.
Okay. Did that happen before Tona LLC purchased this property?
In major storms,
Sure.
but with global warming and with the hardscape that's been done by clearing the road in 1993, and with other property owners hardscaping and taking out coastal grasses and grass, it doesn't absorb like it used to.
Okay.
And so it is worse.
So the hardscape was there before Tona LLC purchased the property?
Hardscape of the road.
And also that lot, right? I mean, Mr. McKenna testified there were parties there were, fireplaces kept in those little cabanas.
Keep in mind that that's fair weather use.
Sure.
When you're boating, it's a beautiful day.
Right,
And so at the end of the day, you leave.
right.
2 days later, you have a storm. You're not down there. You're not going to your boat,
Oh, for sure.
right?
Absolutely.
It's not a nice day.
Okay.
So
I just wanted clarity on when the hardscapes came to be. If they
Okay.
came before Tona LLC, which it sounds like that's when they were there.
Some of them, but
Okay.
there's additional grading being done because of the house.
Okay, thank
And
you.
also, the house covers 40 feet of the impervious area that would also help drainage and absorption into the ground. So, and if we have more structures down there, you're going to have more of that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Anyone else speaking in favor of this application? Sir, we'll need your name and address for the record, and please keep your comments to new information.
Hi, I'm Mark Lofthouse. I live at 56 Wilbar Avenue.
I'm sorry,
having sat
sir.
on that side
Sir,
of the table for 8
sir,
years.
Pardon me. I did not get your name, please.
Pardon me?
Your name.
Mark Lofthouse, 56 Wilbar Avenue. Having sat on that side for 8 years, I'm getting a taste for how bad the sound system is back here. Everybody sounds like a Charlie Brown parent. Wah, 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 wah. I watched the YouTube videos about the planning and zoning meeting and privy to a lot of the information. By the way, thank you for hearing us this evening. And I'm kind of left shocked at the lack of questioning from the zoning board when this application first came in. One, the city engineer's letter requesting a road and all sorts of curbing, then he rescinds it 6 months later. By the way, his request for a road was actually spot on. But the site in 1993 reason why the city didn't want to put a road in, that's back when the city said those are 10-foot strips of land that people are there between April and October to go down to their boat. Now you're putting a house in there. You're putting a subdivision in there. I believe during the YouTube video, one of the applicant's attorney mentioned the word subdivision. I'm like, subdivision? But as you look at it, that one house is going to lead way to, the gentleman's got 80-foot land by 100, another guy's got 50 by 100. This application is 40 by 100. You can only imagine that there's going to be more than one house there in relatively quick time. I know that there's already 2 that I've heard are being proposed. So why the city would not want to put a road into a subdivision is beyond me. I sat on many meetings on that side of the desk, and never once was a house proposed in an area where you would need a public road not requested. One can only imagine that they were saving the applicant money because he's a very well-known and connected person. He's on this board. Or, at some point in the future, the applicants of the owners of those properties are going to ask the city to abandon the road, get half the land on their side without having to put in a road. So it's kind of obvious what's going on here. The average person doesn't get afforded this kind of glad handing. As far as the flooding, why that wasn't addressed more in the zoning board is beyond me. I know, having grown up in Milford, we flood everywhere in town. But having lived in Wilbar for 3 years, I would think, from what I've seen, at least it has to be 10 to 12 times a year that property is deep underwater. As recent as I believe it was a few weeks ago, it was deep underwater again. I think since the application's been there, there's been equipment and timbers all underwater. I'm just shocked at the negligence of the zoning board for not addressing the road and pushing the city engineer's requirement for a road. But B, the flooding issue and the hazards and safety issues that presents. It's amazing. It's not so much that it floods all the way up to Harborview Road. It's not just that property. That area is horrible down there. And how this was ignored by the zoning board is beyond me. I'm shocked. I don't have much more to say. I don't know how much we're going to be effective here tonight. Staff has said basically, you can't do anything about it. It's irrelevant. But where does the citizens go when we're challenging a board, but short of getting a $50,000 retainer to an attorney and going to court? We shouldn't even be here tonight. That application should never have been heard. And to go back to 1923 to a 4,000 square foot lot, at one point there was another zone down there with 6,000 square feet. Why didn't they choose that? Because it didn't fit their needs. I bought in that area, it was a 12,500 square foot lot was required. Now it's 4,000, built in a flooded area with no city road. If you aren't shocked, I'd be surprised. I can't say much more about it. I hope there's some way to prevail, but the citizens here their lives are turned upside down by this, also someone can build themselves a party hut that they're going to use that in the summertime. It's sad. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else speaking in favor of this application?
Yes, Dave Sirico, 61 Wellbar Avenue. I am fully supporting this appeal presented by our attorney, and that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else speaking in favor?
My name is Linda Gwozdik, 41 Rose Street. Lived there since 1962. That particular area is not in front of my house. It's the other end of Rose Street. However, it's always been slips and docks. There's never been any idea of putting a house in there, as they've all attested to the water issues. And now they've put this monstrosity there. It's like, how would you like to wake up, no notice whatsoever, and have a lighthouse put in your backyard? This house is 13, 16 feet off the ground to start with, and 2 or 3 stories high. It's just it doesn't even meet the standards of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Hold your applause, please. Anyone else speaking in favor?
My name is Catherine Gibb. I live at 56 Harborview Avenue. We've lived here less than a year, and I am very much in favor of this, as I feel that it was not building that house was not gone about in an honorable way. Thank you.
Thank you. Please hold your applause. We're just looking for public comment at this time. If you're speaking in favor, please come forward.
Hello, I'm Nancy Fellini. I live at 71 Harborview Avenue. I've lived there since the early 90s. When there is a weather issue, the water it comes up to my garage, and I'm probably a couple of 100 feet from the harbor. During Sandy, it went up to the corner of Harborview and and Rose. And if there has been any adjustment to the land level there, everything is going to flow into my yard. You cannot get onto that road many, many times a year due to the water. I am fully in favor of this application.
Thank you. Anyone else speaking in favor?
Hi, Susan McKenna, 24 Rose Street. We have lived here about 15 years. During that time, prior to new ownership, the property contained a seasonal entertaining area with a roof. Upon many walks, I noticed the seating areas, a table, patio, and brick fireplace. The setup fit the character of the neighborhood and the surrounding properties, as none of the surrounding properties were year-round structures. This new structure is out of character for the area and causes many to wonder about the preservation and conservation of our coastal community. It is not only out of character for the surrounding neighborhood, but as a dwelling on a lot of 1/10 of an acre, 4,000 square feet roughly, in a 12,500 square foot zone, it is out of character for the harbor community as well, which we know encompasses Milford citizens and guests. I wonder about the impact on the coastal environment, the coastal wetlands, and the soil underneath, the marine life, the water table, and the fragile harborside ecosystem in general. If we are transitioning away from seasonal entertaining areas, I wonder about the impact on the surrounding climate, sustainability of the precious area, and I wonder, is the harbor ecosystem at risk within this fragile and valuable wetland flood zone? Thank you very much for hearing this, and I'm in favor of this appeal.
Thank you. Anyone else speaking in favor?
My name is Joseph Newman. We live at 23 Wilbar Avenue, and we fully support this appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else speaking in favor?
My name is Marty Giuliano. I live at 35 Wilbar Avenue. I've been living there for about 16 years and fully support this application. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Marty Reed. I live at 30 Harborview Avenue. I've lived there for 53 years. I've seen water come up the end of my street many times. The property on the water should be held for boaters, their parties, their picnics, their cabanas, their barbecues. It is not a road. It is not a housing lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sean Peterkin. I live at 45 Harborview Avenue, and I find it pretty ridiculous that we're all here. As my neighbor said, this would have never gone through if it was anybody else, and it's pretty obvious what's going on. I'm fully supportive of this appeal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Andrew Geltman. I live at 28 Wilbar Avenue. I've been there since 2017, and I also fully approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else speaking in favor? Is there anyone opposed to this application?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. For the record, my name is Kevin Kersaden. I'm the attorney for the applicant and property owner, Tona LLC, and I'm also the attorney that took the applications through the year-and-a-half-plus regulatory process for all the different approvals. So I agree with all of Stephen's points, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of more. When you go through the inland wetlands application process, for example, that the coastal site plan application for a single-family house was posted on the inland wetlands agenda. It was posted in the newspaper when it was approved. It was also posted on the city website that was approved for a single-family house. That was in September of 2021. Following that, in April of 2022, was the coastal site plan application. Once again, that was on the Planning and Zoning Board agenda. That was heard and approved. It was not a public hearing, but it is not required to be a public hearing. Site plans are not public hearings, but usually, sometimes they are, but in this case, it was not a public hearing because the board would need to have a special reason to make it a public hearing. After that, it was published in the news notice of that approval for a single-family house was also published in the Milford Mirror in April of 2022, which is now it's almost over a year later. I can speak to a couple of the other comments that there's some kind of favoritism or something else going on, but I'll state what the facts are. The 1993 stipulated judgment that was referenced and was entered as a part of an exhibit. What the end result of that is that it is a public right-of-way, but in speaking with the city attorney after we received the city engineer's memo requiring the standard curbs and sidewalks and so on and so forth, there was a couple of different things going on. Number one, some of the people in the neighborhood who were aware of the project did not want that road improved. They liked the country nature of that road, and they didn't want to put the curbs and have it paved and have it widened because the road itself is actually, or the public street is actually much wider than what the gravel road currently consists of. It would go another 15 or 20 feet into some lawn area of the adjoining properties that back up onto Rose Street. So, the other part of it is that stipulated judgment, basically one of the outcomes of it was that it was going to stay a public street or a public right-of-way. If a neighboring property owner wanted to improve it, they could improve it at their own cost. If a neighboring property owner did not want to improve that road or widen that street, they would not be required to. So based on neighbor comments, some other neighbors, other property owners on Edgewater Place. And in the area, we had brought that up with the city attorney and then with the city engineer. So one of the differences in his letter, his earlier September 15th, 2021 letter, which was in preparation or for the inland wetlands meeting, was the removal of that requirement. The other requirement removals were as a result of the plans being revised to address his comments about drainage and other things. And Ron Wassmer from CT Civil Group was the civil engineer that handled that. So, and that's a process that works with the city engineer pretty consistently. You go through, if you're going through inland wetlands, he makes comments, you revise the plans, and you further refine the plans. So that's why that letter is different, and that is why the road is not improved. This property owner did not want to improve the road. I don't think any of the neighbors, I'm hearing different comments tonight from different neighbors that they wanted the road improved, but that's not what we were hearing when we had the original approval process. So the reason I submitted about 13 attachments today via email was to show to the board that we've diligently followed all the different approval processes. And for some people on the board that aren't familiar with all the different approval processes that go along with a property that has either inland wetlands or tidal wetlands or requires a coastal site plan application, is you can see how long it takes and how many different set of eyes look at this property. In addition to the site plan in the inland wetlands, there was also docks that were replaced that required Connecticut DEEP approval, which was also done through another professional and through that Mr. Montano had hired and in conjunction with working with DEEP. So there has been several different engineers involved. There's been an architect involved. Mr. Wicko is here this evening. We've worked with staff consistently all the way through to ensure, because one of the things from the very beginning that Mr. Montano wanted to make sure is that we complied and followed each and every step appropriately, and he hired all the professionals to make sure that that happened. So that's the reason for all of the permits. So he has about 5 permits, all necessary related approvals. So when the Planning and Zoning Board hears a coastal site plan application, they're looking at 2 main things. Is it zoning compliant, and is it in compliance with the Coastal Area Management Act? The city planner gives an administrative summary, which I also supplied to the board, about whether he has any comments or concerns. In the administrative summary for this, there was a comment that the stairs were into the setback. So those plans have been revised before receiving a zoning permit from Mr. Harris to pull the stairs back out of that setback. Otherwise, it was determined to be completely zoning compliant. Like I said, there was at least 2 notices in the Milford Mirror about the different approvals. There's no requirement to post on the property. Regulation 6.4.1 does not apply here. Mr. Harris is correct on that. If it did, we would have followed that necessary procedure. Notably, with all of the materials that were submitted tonight, no one has submitted a certificate of zoning compliance that they said was issued, and which is what the appeal is based on. There is no certificate of zoning compliance. That happens, as Mr. Soda said, at the end of the process now. About 10 years ago, when the city attorney, Mr. Bertram, became city attorney, maybe 12 years ago now, there was discussions in the land use community about municipalities issuing certificates of zoning compliance and whether they should or shouldn't. Milford, based on the city attorney's advice, decided that they would no longer issue certificates of zoning compliance except in conjunction with issuing a certificate of occupancy when construction was complete, because there was liability issues with the city giving something affirmative to somebody saying that, hey, this is completely 100% zoning compliant, because that sometimes takes a lot of research and diligence to determine whether that's actually true or not. So there has been no improper influence. Members of the community, as you all are allowed to sit on boards, and they're also allowed to make zoning applications and have projects approved. There was nothing improper or inappropriate that took place. We've worked hard over, like I said, a year and a half for all of these approvals. The Planning and Zoning Board has made the decision about whether it was the lots were non-conforming or they're consolidated or it was a pre-existing non-conforming building lot or lots. That decision I had with Mr. Sulkus at the very beginning of this process, probably in the spring of 2021, when his preliminary conversation when we were having the docks approved by DEEP for repair and replacement. So there hasn't been anything that's been not followed completely 100% correctly and what's supposed to be done. So I think a lot of the comments and maybe the neighbor frustration is a result of the process itself or the rules or the regulations that are currently in place. But we've made sure to follow everything. If a sign was required to be posted, we would have definitely posted it. So, pending your questions, I think that basically covers it. We would ask that you deny this appeal for the reasons stated.
Attorney Crusaden, so this plan was presented to and approved by Planning and Zoning, Inlands, Wetlands, DEEP, City Engineering, and did not come before this board for any variance requests.
That's correct.
Correct. And to your knowledge, has the construction complied with everything required from all of these departments, the mitigation and the structure, and has that all gone according to plan?
Yes, with a lot of work and double checking to make sure that it's compliant.
Okay. And notice of these various approvals were put in the newspaper. You said that some neighbors who were aware of the project had some thoughts about the road improvement. How did those neighbors become aware of the project, and so many others sitting here today didn't seem to know anything was going on until, I believe one said the first pile went into the property?
The neighbors that expressed concern were on the harbor side, owned property on the harbor side of Edgewater, or at least that were made aware of it. I don't know if they heard directly from either Mr. Montano or somebody working in that area that something was going on, but a few neighbors wrote letters to the city engineer saying we don't want the road, and a couple of neighbors also wrote letters in support of that application.
And was notice in the newspaper all that was required as a result of these various approvals? There was no letter at any time that needed to go out to neighbors in the area?
Correct, because there was no variance, there was no sign posted, and there was no mailing, and because it's a residential single-family use in a residential single-family zone, it's not a special permit. So there was no mailing or sign required under the special permit procedures. It was just a site plan.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Soto.
Attorney Crusaden, I just want to go over a couple things. So before you applied for the coastal site plan review, you didn't have to get these lots certified because they were for individual, or so you didn't have to go through that and post that in the newspaper or anything?
No, I had a conversation with Mr. Sulkus on that, and it was determined that the lot itself was a pre-existing non-conforming lot as a standalone lot at that time.
So how did you get away with not requiring the 12,500? Because it was from 1924?
Well, we didn't, I respectfully rephrase that. We didn't get away with anything. Many times, I've done many applications where lots that are pre-existing non-conforming lots are undersized, and if you meet the other zoning requirements in order to put a single-family house, you can get a permit for a single-family house. You don't have to have that lot certified. I'll also point out that apparently, and I can submit it for the record, the tax card, if you look at the value over the past number of years prior to this application, the lot appears to be taxed as a building lot, and it is in the residential zone, So the R12.5, if we were going for a subdivision or something along those lines, we would have, any new lot would have to meet the 12,500 square foot regulation. But an existing lot or lots that you either consolidate or that are standalone, pre-existing, non-conforming, if you can meet the zoning, the other, like the setbacks and the lot coverage and those other bulk requirements for the zone, you can get a zoning permit for that. You can obtain a zoning permit for that.
All right, that's all I have.
Any other questions?
I would, it's not really the zoning matter, but just in respect to the difference in the pilings, that was approved by the building department. It's still a requirement, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, thank you, Attorney Krusaden.
Thanks.
Mr. Case?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have to say, I've served on boards and commissions. I sat in that office as city attorney more than 10 years ago, and I've heard some things tonight that I simply can't believe. First of all, these are the zoning regulations. If someone wants to make a change to the zoning regulations, it's not up to someone over there to decide how it's going to be done. It's not up to David Sulkus to decide how it's going to be done. It has to be changed by the Planning and Zoning Board. They make the change. So if we have a regulation that says certificates of zoning compliance, that's what we have. If someone wants to change that, there's a process to change it. The board votes on it, they take it out, just like they took out section 6.4.2. They took it out. They voted on it. They took it out. So I've heard Mr. Harris give his recitation. He picked around a little bit. We said zoning regulations were the sign. Milford zoning regulations. It's not the Orange zoning regulations. It's not the Woodbridge zoning regulations. It's the Milford zoning regulations. And I've heard my colleague, Mr. Krusaden, go through the list of all the things that they've done. But neither Mr. Harris nor Attorney Krusaden have hit the threshold question. And that's, what about section 6.4.1? What about the process for non-conforming lots? These are non-conforming lots. We know that. There's 4,000 square feet in an R12.5 zone. They don't meet the area, they don't meet the width, the only thing they meet is the length. We have a process that one is supposed to follow. That process wasn't followed. We've heard all sorts of discussions about all the permits we got and how we went to this board and we got this and we posted this and we put something in the newspaper about this, but no one said anything about 6.4.1, except someone made a decision that it didn't apply. And that decision is not anywhere in that planning and zoning file. We inventoried that file. It ain't there. It's not there. How is the public supposed to know what's going on if it goes down and looks at a file and a salient piece of information, probably the dispositive piece of information, isn't there because it was a conversation? That's not the way we should be doing business. And frankly, you can put a stop to it tonight, and I hope you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me, just going back one moment. Is there anyone else opposed to this application? Any more questions from the board?
Is this a right to rebuttal at this point?
No.
I spoke prior to this, so I-
No, just for Attorney
When you
Case.
speak first and the attorney stands up and speaks, I'm allowed to stand up as a rebuttal if I spoke prior.
You were allowed to issue public
I
comment.
spoke once, and I'm rebutting what I heard.
Attorney Case brought this issue, and he is allowed the rebuttal.
I'm a public. I spoke. I have a right to rebut. I've sat in that board for 8 years. I know it.
I'm going to have to ask you to
So you're
sit down, sir.
denying me the right to
You've
speak.
given your public comment. You've given your public comment, you're on the
I'm
record.
rebutting it. So you're not following protocol and you're denying me a right to speak.
Our protocol is that Attorney Case...
Our protocol or
Our
the
protocol is that Attorney Case brought the issue, he presented it, and he gets the rebuttal, and
Great,
then
and
we
I
move on to
spoke.
discussion.
I heard from the attorney, and I'd like to rebut.
Are you an attorney, sir?
Pardon me?
Are you an attorney?
No, am I supposed to be?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, so we do have a procedure that is followed every board meeting. Counsel that represents the application and counsel opposed to the application have the right to rebut and frankly debate, as we saw tonight. Public comment is allowed to proceed given the parameters of what we all went through already.
What the
in
attorney
favor
said
or in
rebutted
opposition.
what I said. I reserve the right to stand up and
Does
and rebut
Mr.
him.
Case represent you, sir?
I spoke prior to this, so I have a right to rebut.
Sir, please, we are not here to create a YouTube moment of
I'm not creating a YouTube moment. I sat on
drama.
the board for 8 years.
With
and I
all
know
due
what
respect,
goes on. I know what we're
does
required.
Mr. Case represent your interests, sir?
So you were denying me a right to speak.
You had an opportunity to speak,
you're
and you did
denying me a
speak,
right to
and that is
rebut.
on the record, sir.
You're denying me
We
a
have
right.
an order and procedure. Please take
Just
your
want to make
seat.
it for the record.
Madam
I'll be
Chairman has
filing.
asked,
Thank you.
and I'm also asking. Thank you.
Excuse me.
Sir, we're done with comments.
Okay, I just wanted, is it possible to hand in one more? We have a petition from the neighbors. Is that something I can hand in, or am I missing on that?
At this point, I think...
Go ahead.
No, if you don't want it, it's fine. I'm just asking the question.
I think Mr. Case has reserved the right for rebuttal. If there's any information to be presented, it should be presented through Mr. Case. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I see no harm in Mr. McKenna submitting his petition for the record.
Okay, please bring forth the paperwork. Any more questions? No more questions from the board? Okay, then this hearing is closed. What are our thoughts?
Motion first, and then we speak.
All right. So, yes, we'll need to make a motion first, and then we can discuss.
Motion to approve Mr. McKenna by Attorney Case's application for appeal.
Second.
If I might, typically in an appeal, there's an motion to uphold the decision or overturn the decision.
So motion to uphold the decision of the Zoning Enforcement Office.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Discussion?
You know, I credit the public that came out tonight and provided their concerns and their testimony about the nature of the water that they have been experiencing, it sounds like, for many decades when there's an unfortunate weather system in the area. And to all council who spoke tonight and gave a detailed presentation along with the exhibits we received to uphold and support the presentation and testimony of council. I do know that the board and we are all on the same page with the order in which we conduct these hearings, and they are in accordance with our rules and regulations for a reason, so that the public has an opportunity to speak and so that the business of the board can be conducted in the appropriate manner.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm sympathetic to the concerns of a lot of the residents here tonight, and we're a shoreline community, and a lot of us have seen personally or just lived through the storms. And I think it touches on an issue that we should have long and complex conversations about as a city and a community. Looking ahead, NOAA says we're going to have another foot of sea level rise in the next 30 years. UConn School says maybe 2 feet before the time that I pay off my mortgage in 2050. So we need to have those complex conversations about a city and a community and how we do zoning. And maybe as the conversation tonight, maybe we need to look at the notice requirements. But one of the charges that we have as a board is to look at what's in front of us and our zoning enforcement officer, and what we've heard over tonight and the term is that we don't have that authority, and the authority appears to be vested in the court, and it appears that both parties have very, very well-spoken counsel. And so if they choose to avail themselves of that option, I'm sure that they can go there. But I just wanted to say thank you all for coming out and voicing your opinions.
I agree, Mr. Smith. I feel for the community members here tonight. I live on the harbor myself, and seeing the changes, seeing the development, it does make you wonder how far things might go, how it's going to impact our neighborhoods, how it's going to impact our climate. However, many of the issues that were brought up tonight do not pertain to this board. The things discussed tonight are not in our jurisdiction to manage. We cannot change zoning regulations at this board. We cannot change procedure at this board. We are only here to appeal the decision, possibly of the zoning enforcement officer, not of the planning and zoning board, not of the city planner. There are other avenues for this. Any other comments?
Well, I agree with you, Sarah, and I mean, I'm very sympathetic, and you guys put on a great presentation, but we don't have the authority. I suggest you guys all contact your planning and zoning members and get some zone changes or some regulation changes in effect, so you can try to stop the further development. You guys, are there 9 members on the board? 10? Yeah. They're all in your district. Reach out to them and make your case to them. We have no authority here.
All right, so we have a motion on the table to uphold the decision of the zoning enforcement officer. And we have a second. So we will put it to a vote. Mr. Smith?
With the motion.
Mr. Soda?
With the motion.
Ms. Hirsch?
With the motion.
Mr. Dubois?
With the motion.
And I'm with the motion. Thank you for coming out tonight. We appreciate hearing from you all. Mr. Dubois. Mr. Dubois, can you please go get Mr. Montano? Oh, please. If everyone could please continue to make their way to the door and keep your voices down, hold comment for the hallway. We do have an agenda to carry on with. Thank you for voting, Mr. Dubois, Mr. Montano. We will bring you back into the vote for items number 2 and 3. Ms. Hirsch, if you can continue with item number 2.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 12 Deerfield Avenue, MBP 28/575/18 R-5, Charles McKenty, owner, to vary section 4.1.4, projection to 4.5 feet, where 8 feet permitted to construct front porch with steps.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you, members of the board. It's McEntee, but that's okay. close enough.
Sir, if you could speak more
Yes.
clearly into the microphone.
Charles McEntee,
Thank you.
12 Deerfield. And basically, we have Stephen, you have yeah, that's what I was asking him to put on there. That was my whole thing. We have a small, it is a pre-existing non-conforming lot, 35 by 101, according to the survey we had done about a month and a half ago. And you can see that there is a small landing outside the front door with steps going along the side of the house down to the front walk. We've owned the house for 30 years, or maybe 32 years, and we've been living permanently in it for about the last 3 or 4. I grew up as a beach kid in Bayview, so, but anyway, my wife is disabled. We're looking at back surgery, major back surgery soon, and we're finding it harder and harder to get in and out of the front of the house because the landing gets swept by the entire storm door that's on the front door. Trying to keep everything in line. Also, without any kind of covering in the front, the Amazon packages that arrive at 7:45 at night that you don't find till the next morning when it rains overnight, they're soaking wet. There's a bunch of different things involved with that, but we're finding access to the house is much more difficult. We are looking to extend right now we are in compliance. We're basically looking to extend the front landing out about an extra foot and run for about 13 feet along about 2/3 of the front of the house, and then have steps coming straight down out to the walk. So of the 4 feet that's excess, about 3 of that is the steps going down to the pre-existing walk. There is a tree and also some of the sewer lines and stuff that are on the north side of the property. And so by stopping it at 13 feet, that keeps us away from all of those things. A few years ago, we had to dig up all the sewer pipe because of the tree roots and all that stuff. So we're trying to keep away from all those things. But this will give us much more ease of access into the home. Let's see, we got that. And what we're planning to do should maintain the look and feel of the neighborhood. As far as I know, there are no neighbors that are in opposition. As you all know with Bayview, the houses are all close and all non-conforming probably. From the fact that I had to send 55 letters out to everyone was, a big job to do that. And the few neighbors that I've talked to who are on the list said, "Hey, what are you going to do? It sounds great." So it's just to give us a little more ease of access. And actually, the first person I talked to was my next door neighbor on the north side of my property, and he is all in favor of us doing this. And he's a fireman in New Haven right now. He's working tonight. But again, as far as I know, there are no neighbor objections to what we're trying to do. Probably the porch, I'm still waiting to get back to my contractor, but it'll probably be something like a narrow deck. We have a deck in the back of the house, which is the vinyl Trex, I think it is, or something like that. And so we'll probably have something similar on the front. It just will meet the size requirements that are here.
Thank you. Let me ask you a question. How far does the current landing project? I see on the plan here, I think you're going to go out 5 feet with the new one and then the stairs?
Right now, it's 4, I believe.
Oh, okay. Thank
Madam Chair, the existing landing is 8.65 feet. You look, this measurement right here, 865, over to where this landing is.
Okay.
The larger rectangle, that,
Thank you. Thank you. So, yep, perfect. Okay, any other questions? No, okay. Is there anyone here speaking in favor of the application? Is there anyone
something I
opposed? I have to ask the question.
I know.
Okay. Any more questions? No. Okay. This hearing is closed. So we'll need to start with
I make a motion to approve.
Great. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Okay. And discussion. I personally don't have a problem with this. I think that this is a fair and minimal ask. It's only coming out another 1.5 feet. It's not even going all the way across the house. I think it's a very fair compromise to get a larger, wider egress and not bombard the neighborhood with more projection. Okay, great. Moving on to a vote. Mr. Smith.
With the motion.
Mr. Soda.
With the motion.
Ms. Hirsch.
With the motion.
Mr. Montano.
With the motion.
And I'm with the motion. It passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming in. Okay, and now we are on to item number 3, but Stephen, I'm not seeing anyone else in the room.
I don't see anyone else either. So your choices are, you can take it on the papers, or you can leave the hearing open so that the applicant can show up next month.
Okay, what was our first option?
You can take it on the papers, examine his application and make up your mind, or
Okay.
you can hold it up.
I say we hold it over to next month.
I would agree with that. I'm not in favor of approving something if nobody's here to defend it, or even really denying it. So, yeah, I have no problem with that if somebody wants to make a motion. Or do we need a motion?
I make a motion.
Yeah, it's just a motion to hold the hearing open.
Hold the hearing open until next month, number 3.
Seconded.
Great. Mr. Smith.
With the motion.
Mr. Soda.
With the motion.
Ms. Hirsch.
With the motion.
Mr. Montano.
With the motion.
I'm with the motion. Okay. That concludes our agenda items. Is there any new business? Any old business? Any staff updates? Okay, we need a motion to accept the minutes from last month's meeting.
Just a quick note on that. Based on the experience that people had at the trainings, even the minutes have to be a roll vote.
Okay.
So
Great.
It's a bit odd, but
That's fine. All right, so we need a motion to approve the minutes from March.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from March.
And seconded.
Great. Mr. Smith.
With the motion.
Mr. Soda.
With the motion.
Ms. Hirsch.
With the motion.
Mr. Montano.
With the motion.
I'm with the motion. Okay, and do we have any, well, we've got 35 Thompson Street now next month. Anything else?
I think there are 3 more.
Yes, we have an appeal for 354 Woodmont.
An appeal?
So yet another appeal.
An appeal of a notice of violation.
Okay, Joe's coming back, right? Okay. Okay, meeting adjourned.